We're now on to our final session of the ICOACHKIDS Conference, which is an expert panel on engaging females in sport. Chairing the panel, we have Dr. Annette Stride, and Annette is a principal lecturer and course director of physical education in the Carnegie School of Sport at Leeds Beckett University. Her research and practice are both underpinned by a social justice agenda, and her research adopts an intersectional approach to consider how gender interplays with other identity markers, including age, sexuality, ethnicity, race, and disability, to influence different women's and girls' experiences of physical education, sport, and physical activity. Annette uses her research to inform her practice, including as a coach to a weekly football session for women staff, students, and community members that has been in operation for over 20 years. Joining Annette on our panel, on our expert panel, we have Jose Neto, head coach of Brazil women's basketball, Naadrah Hafeez, a boxing coach in the UK and postgraduate research student at Leeds Beckett University, Elisabeth Cebrian, head of women in basketball and special projects at FIBA, and Paul Carson, chairman of the board at the Coaching Association of Canada. Hello all, and over to you, Annette.
Hear me. I just wanted to say that I'm really delighted to be sharing this panel. As you can probably tell from the introduction, it's an area that I'm really passionate about. It's one that I've lived. Like many young girls, I was told what sports I could and I couldn't take part in, and luckily I didn't listen, and it fired me up to I think really in some respects it sort of began to dictate how my career began to look. So it's those early experiences have certainly fueled my research interests and my coaching. It's a topic area for me that unfortunately we still need to champion in both research and practice. Girls are still being inadequately served by poor early experiences of physical education in schools. Professional sportswomen are still fighting for equal pay, and we still have an underrepresentation of women in sports leadership roles, as one of our earlier speakers alluded to. So we need change, and it's something that ICOACHKIDS are extremely committed to achieving, hence putting on this panel this evening. And the panelists that we've got with us tonight are certainly contributing in lots of different ways to make this happen, and we're going to hear about that in the next 30 minutes. So we've got a series of questions to sort of signpost to the panel, and the first one I wanted to ask Betty, how did you get into basketball, and were there any moments during your sort of teenage years where you thought about dropping out of the sport?
Thank you very much, Annette, and I hope you can hear me. And it's my big pleasure to join this panel today. Well, I am originally from Spain, so being close to 2 meters tall, you can imagine that this was not easy life for me in living in Spain. And honestly speaking, now thinking about those days, it was really tough. You can imagine the average age for girls or women are 165, and I was over or close to 2 meters. So it was tough, but I have to say that I had a fantastic supporting team around me, and I will start naming my mother as a key person. Obviously, she was very tall as well, and that's the genetic I got from her. But she always supported me, reminding me how special and unique I was. And this really helped me to grow my self-confidence and also strengthen my self-esteem, obviously. But in addition to that, how I then discovered the sport was thanks to my PE teacher at school, who was capable to, or immediately saw obviously my physical condition and athletic skills. And he was the one proposing me to engage more in sports, and especially in basketball due to my size, right? So, and this is when I start to play organized sport, and suddenly I really felt like a big sense of belonging to a community, right? And this feeling accepted and somehow connected to my peers really I felt like, okay, this is where I wanna be and I wanna stay. So at the same time, also it fueled somehow my self-worth and at school. So I wasn't the tall giraffe anymore. I was the proud basketball player, right? So this, I had ups and downs during my whole process, of course, but I would say that if these pillars are strong and stable, at the end you will manage and you will keep going. So the most important thing I would say that this nowadays sport is still a key part of my life and made the person that I am today.
Yeah. Okay. That's a lovely story. So sport almost became a safe space for you growing up. Yeah. Okay. And I wondered if I could ask the same question to Naadrah in terms of how did you get into boxing and how sort of easy or difficult did you find it to access the sport?
I actually got into boxing later on. So I was 18 at the time. So it was my first year of uni. For me, I got into it because I'd gone through quite a difficult time. My grandma had passed away and I was struggling. So it was more of from a mental health perspective, as well as physically, I wanted to get fitter and stronger. And so I called up several clubs and I happened to speak to my head coach then, and he was the most welcoming on the phone. I just got an amazing energy and a vibe off him, and I didn't bother calling anyone else at that point. And then I went into the gym and I was the only girl there for the session. But the coaches, all the boys, the boxers, they all made me feel at home. And I think that's what it was. I just felt at home. And I can't describe it in any other way. I didn't feel like I was the odd one out or anything like that. It was anything they could do, I could do. And so it was a very, very positive experience, I'd say. And I'm aware that for everyone, it's not like that. I've just been very privileged in that sense.
Yeah, that's it feels like we've rehearsed the answer between yourself and Betty, because we both, you've both talked about sport feeling like a safe space for you, feeling like a home, feeling like it's somewhere where you belong at a time where you might not feel that in the sort of wider world. What else who else do you think has helped sort of facilitate your involvement in boxing, or do you feel that there's been any challenges to you being involved?
I wouldn't say, for me, I'm very blessed in the sense that I've got a very supportive network. I mean, my mum doesn't want me to get punched in the face. I mean, I don't think any mother wants that, but she's very supportive. But I think the enablers are definitely the people that you have around you, the coaches, your peers, the other boxers that are a part of the club, because it's all to do with the environment that you walk into. If you feel comfortable and you feel included, you're more likely to stay. And so I think they're like the key people in your life, are your family, your friends, and your team. Although it's an individual sport, boxing, we're a team at our gym, and it's all about supporting one another and having that unity and that network.
Brilliant. Thank you, Naadrah. Thank you. I shall come back to both you and Betty, but I wondered if I could just ask you a question, Jose, about basketball. So Betty's talked about her experiences growing up in Spain. I wondered if you could just describe the sort of current situation with basketball in Brazil in terms of the sort of participation and retention of women and girls in the sport.
Hello for everybody. First of all, I deeply appreciate this invitation and the opportunity to share a little of my experience and ideas in women's sports in Brazil, especially basketball. So let me talk a little bit about the Brazilian basketball. Basketball and Brazil are no strange to each other. Men's basketball won back-to-back world championships in 1959 and 1963, and was runner-up in 54 and again in 1970. Brazil and Great Britain are the only ones to have played in a world championships. And the women's basketball belong in a very exclusive club alongside the US, the former Soviet Union, and Australia, being the only four nations to have ever won a world title. We won the gold in 1994, and the Olympics, we won the silver in 96 and the bronze in Sydney, Australia. Some Brazilian players have been inducted the FIBA's Hall of Fame, names like Hortensia Macari, Maria Paula, and Annette Stride, among others that Betty knows better, no, Betty? Although Brazil did occupy the top spot at the sometimes history, women's basketball is unfortunately a not popular sport in the country. If you take Brazil's size in its population, it's a very small number compared to some much smaller European country where the sport is much more popular. We have a few competitions because we have a few teams here in Brazil. We are currently partnering with FIBA America, the Brazilian Olympic Committee, and Estácio University to create teaching schools and training centers. We believe the more mentors we have, the more popular the sport can become. The young women who stand out there have been given scholarships to play in high schools and universities in the US. We have over 50 girls currently playing in the US. Although this is a fantastic situation for the athletes and for their evolution and development, it's very hard for us as a nation to keep them here due to the difference in structure and overall conditions. We see it as a long-term investment, as these athletes gain knowledge and experience to eventually be able to play for their home country in future competitions. They are certainly role models that inspire other young girls to join the sport of basketball.
Thank you. Do you think it's a sport that's growing in terms of girls' participation, Jose, or not?
I believe these major barriers are few competitive teams and a few competitions, coaches with very little or not at all focus on the player development and evolution, which leads to stimulus to compete. No? Other priorities, school, work, family needs, I think it's so.
Okay, thank you. And Paul, I wondered if I could ask a similar question to you, really, in relation to ice hockey in Canada. You know, what is the sort of participation and retention rates of girls in that sport?
Well, I think ice hockey is probably a similar landscape to girls sports right across Canada. Okay. We were very fortunate through the 90s to see some tremendous growth in youth hockey on the women's side, but it plateaued as we got into the early 2000s, and through the period of sort of 2010 to 2020, the real focus became retaining young girls in the sport. So you could see a wonderful inclusion of young girls between the ages of 6 and 10, but a drastic drop off after that. And again, that's a reflection of the landscape in young girls in sport, is that, you know, between that age of 10 and 13, if the experience isn't right for the girls, if the opportunities that they're having in sport don't meet their needs, there's a good chance they'll drop out. And we know that from the statistics that boys tend to, I don't know if it's right to say put up with a little more, but they They do. So you see 1 in 3 girls dropping out, whereas you see 1 in 10 boys dropping out in those age ranges. So I would say that ice hockey isn't a whole lot different than any of the other sports across the country. I think the reality is, and you know, at one point here, I have to mention, Dr. Lavoie's presentation, like, there's just so much there. All you have to do is capture all that she talked about to know what the challenges are. And I know we'll get to these in a little while, but, you know, in Canada, we have the Canadian Women in Sport. We have Jumpstart, which is a Canadian Tire charity. And then we've got Sport Canada. And we've got, you know, wonderful advocacy for research and understanding young girls and women in sport, and, you know, trying to put together better plans and better processes to support the growth of young girls and women in sport.
Yeah, you've linked me nicely into the next question that I was going to ask you, which was, could you give us some examples of any initiatives that are that sort of exist in Canada to try and drive either girls' participation or to try and retain more girls in youth sport, and if you think they're working, and you know, if not, why not?
Well, I think Dr. Lavoie talked about this very specifically, and that is leadership and role models in youth sport. And what's really important in my mind is that women lead women's sport. That's the bottom line. I think that in the case of, I'll give you an example. We have women coming into coaching roles in sport, and Dr. Lavoie talked about the fact that at the grassroots level, there's a real challenge there. So you start to work your way up the pyramid. Who's responsible for training coaches? Who are the coach developers? Beyond the coach developers, who are the administrators that support the coach developers? So the goal really is to have this chain of role models all the way through the system, so that female mentors support the growth of coach developers who support the growth of coaches, and women relate to women who are providing them with instruction, providing them with support in their community. So at Hockey Canada, for example, we have a program called the Master Coach Developers Program, and it is specific to women. So we recruited, over a period of 2 years, we recruited 36 cohorts who participated in the program. They were educated through all of the necessary channels through the National Coach Certification Program in Canada, but they were also receiving information like the research done at Tucker Institute, like the research done by Jumpstart and Canadian Women in Sport, so that they understand what the issues are and they understand the challenges that they're confronted with. Now, are these working? It's a little early to say, but I think the longitudinal study on this will demonstrate whether or not more young girls are drawn to sport and more young girls stay in sport because they have female role models, female leadership, and they're in a much safer place in that sport environment.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask a similar question to yourself, Jose, about any initiatives that you think are working or not working in Brazil in terms of trying to drive participation up in girls basketball?
We don't have what the US or Canada does, which are great competition in school and university levels. We only have professional teams. We just recently resumed the under 23 national tournament. There was a big gap between the under 19 and the professional level, which doesn't have that many teams. Therefore, a lot of young girls don't get picked by these teams and ended up quitting the sport. We plan to have an under 20 competition in next year, and in order to help keep these players active and avoid this gap.
Okay, thank you. Betty, in terms of FIBA, what are they doing in basketball to try and drive participation globally?
Well, let me start saying that we had a key milestone, or I want to mention the key milestone that happened in 2019 during the FIBA Congress that we had in China during the World Cup, that decided to put the priority or the focus on women in basketball. So that was the first step where really we saw something happening, right? So after that, the first thing we did was to run like a worldwide survey, trying to measure and evaluate a little bit how was the global landscape in women's basketball to help us tailor the strategy, let's put that way. Obviously, it's not easy when you work at world level trying to find proper projects that suits or meets all the purposes. But we identified some key areas, development areas, and obviously our main goal, one of the main goals, was to increase girls' participation. So to achieve this, we decided to launch like a global or worldwide campaign that is called the Her World, Her Rules campaign. So we decided obviously to put some funding there and support, but we knew from the beginning that money will not be enough, because you really need to give money, this is for sure, but you also need to provide and develop like a full concept and tools for federations to develop this campaign or this program, right? And this is what we did. So we developed this concept. We provided communication marketing tools and also a whole package of branding materials for federations for free to use and free of rights. So, and then federations, to benefit of this campaign, they had to apply with a project that suits their own needs, because you cannot compare, you cannot do same things in all the countries and all the continents. So at the end, we just set some rules and guidelines that all of them have to follow, but giving the freedom to federations to develop their own project based on their needs. And this was very welcome, because obviously funding is always nice and welcome, but also I think to give this whole package helped them a lot to get out there and develop activities and festivals that the girls really welcome, right? So now, last year we support 70 national federations, and for 2022, we just actually today we opened the call, the application for 2022. So okay. We are just waiting for the results, but we are confident that this will be positive, and we invite and encourage all of you to go and see on the social media the Her World, Her Rules campaign.
Okay, that's brilliant. So we've heard a little bit. I think I'm going to be told that I've got to wrap up my questions in a minute, which is a shame because I could talk to everybody all night. We've heard a little bit about national and international policies. Naadrah, I wonder if you could just sort of sum up for us, really, as a coach, what kind of support or environment do you think you create to kind of engage and retain more female boxers?
I think the main ones is an inclusive environment. You know, to have an environment that whoever walks through the door, they feel like they're welcome and they can be themselves. And I think that's a huge part to do with that is the club's attitudes and ethos. So what are you about as a club? What's your coaching philosophy? And I think that's a key part for coaches to have this kind of conversation as a coaching team, but also with the athletes as well. What do you define as the club values and ethos? And as well, like in a lot of clubs, having pictures of female athletes, successful female athletes, having female coaches there. I always remember my head coach saying, look, Naadrah, it's great them having a male coach, but there's only so much they can relate, and I can relate with them because they need a female coach to have that relatedness and those open conversations. And I think it's also about building positive relationships. I think relationships are key, no matter who your participants are. Building positive relationships, that's a foundation. Brilliant.
I think we probably will have to wrap up then. It's a good time. It's it's a good point to end on, because I just want to say as well, congratulations, because I know that you have been accepted onto the UK Coaching Women's Coaching Programme today, I've heard.
Yeah.
So you're obviously doing something right. Yeah, well done, Naadrah. I think, is somebody going to take over from me and tell me to wrap up, or do we have any questions? Do we have a chat facility or any questions for the audience?
Annette, I'll jump in here. And thank
brilliant.
you for facilitating.
Thanks for saving me.
This amazing discussion. Oh, you definitely don't need saving. Again, like you, Annette, I wish we had hours and hours. I could sit here all day and listen. I guess we've got time for one question, and I guess one of the core underpinning themes over the last 2 days of this conference has been around the importance of the athlete's voice, and in this case the woman or the girl's voice. I wonder what experiences different members of the panel have of engaging more women and girls in the conversation, and asking more about why they're involved in sport and what really motivates them to take part, in order for coaches to really start to adopt and adapt those environments. Anybody like to go first?
I don't mind starting off. I have to go back about 25 years. I was mentoring a coaching staff in a female games competition, and it was probably the first time where I was a little bit stunned when I was in the dressing room listening to the coach address the players, and the collaborative conversation that was going on during the talk. In male hockey, the coach talks, everybody listens. In female hockey, there was discussion about whether or not that was the right approach to break the puck out of the zone. And when I was out in the hallway later with the coach, I said, you know what, I have to totally rethink things here, because that is not what I've expected and not what I was used to in the coaching environment that I was in. And so I found it really very early on, my education in better understanding the type of open and communicative environment that young women want in their sport experience.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, I also think language is a major part. You know, there's things like, oh, you run like a girl, or you punch like a girl, and it has very negative connotations. And I know having these open conversation with my boxers, like, it's like, yeah, what is punch like a girl? What is run like a girl? Because if it's what I do, then it must be pretty damn good. And so it's kind of reframing or reshaping these, and I think in a lot of environments, just eliminate those kind of terminologies, those phrases, because it's quite discriminatory, and it's uncalled for, really, and it's not creating an inclusive environment. So I think the language we use as coaches is very, very important.
I fully agree with Naadrah, and also I think sport has to be a platform to help these girls to grow and express themselves, right, and to reach their goals. And I think this conversation obviously is easier if you have women that are your role models, that are creating pathways, and then for you to follow them, no? Right? If you don't have these role models or you don't see them, it becomes more difficult to see any future there. So that's why I think it's really important to create this networking and feel that you are in an environment that you are accepted and integrated. Yeah.
And I think that some of the role models that we have on this call right now, and the teammates that you all work with, are really, really leading the way, are real trailblazers in this work. So thank you so much for all of the work that you do. Thank you, Annette, for facilitating this conversation this evening. And thank you to Paul, Bessie, Naadrah, and Jose for joining us. I wish we had longer, but I'm sure we'll catch up soon. Thank you so much for your time.